Joel Hansen, welcome to Driven.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to see this space and dig into this convo.
So good to see you. It's been a
Yeah,
while. I am so excited for this conversation. As I was saying to you right before we started recording, I knew quite a bit about you, but the more I researched on you, I was just like so blown away by all the different things that you've done over such a short period of time. So I can't wait to dive into it. I would love to just start off with who are you? What invigorates you? And we could go from there.
firstly, thank you for the kind words. It's an honor to be here and lucky to be a guest here. I feel like a bit of my background would include growing up in a big family about an hour from Vancouver. Had three older brothers, one younger sister, and that bigger family environment kind of drew me to sports, which eventually kind of drew me to teamwork, and then startups and business kind of followed after that. In terms of what invigorates me or what kind of makes time evaporate for me when I think of that question, it would be doing hard things with great people and just I think solving problems that are close to my heart. So those would kind of be the three things that come to mind for me.
Hmm. Thanks so much for sharing. I really have been the type of person that has been into asking people right off the bat what invigorates them, especially people that I've just met,
Mm,
because I think so many of us are so prone to ask a person, "What do you do?" versus
mm,
who you are. And I
mm,
think the latter aspect of someone is just as important as what they do for work. So
mm.
talk to me about doing hard things. What do you mean by that? If you could share a little bit of those 3 pillars that you tapped on.
Yeah, I think I love my job. However, 90% of my job, maybe 80%, is typing on a MacBook that Steve Jobs invented or
Mm,
designed a while back. And that's a great thing. But when I think back a couple hundred years ago, laptops just weren't the way you did work. And so I try to remind myself again and again, like getting outside, doing hard things, moving your body, getting in conversation, chatting with people. It's such a beautiful way to remind yourself of what really life is about. And I think it centers and roots you deeper into the work and the problems that you're trying to solve with your job. And so I think for me, I I love, picking projects or challenges with friends or with activities, whether it's, a running challenge or a fitness challenge or even putting together an event or working through a problem with somebody on my team that really pushes the bounds of what I think is possible. I think when I get into that dimension of a stretch goal or like a problem that doesn't feel solvable at its current state, I feel like that's where I enter a new zone of dreaming and creativity and yeah, really just getting outside of my comfort zone. And I think one of the first cold DM coffees I had in Vancouver was with the CEO of Mech at the time. His name was David Labastor. And I still remember I was in my first year of university with a friend named Braden, and we were on LinkedIn trying to figure it out. And I was like, if I get this coffee meeting with David and we can chat with him about life and work, would you come with me? And he said yes. And we ended up going, driving from Langley to Vancouver, sitting in his office. And one of the things he said that really stuck with me was when you are on the edge of discomfort, that's where the most amount of growth comes in your personal life and your work life. And so that's something I've always tried to, take hold of is whether it's in my marriage or whether it's in my work or my personal fitness or hobbies, I try to ask, yes, it's good to be in a zone of, you know, comfortability and routine when you're, training at certain zones, but it's also good to ask yourself once a month, once a week, once a quarter, what's that next zone of discomfort I can, bring myself to really push my mental state or my physical state so that I can maybe evolve and transform into the next stage of myself. And so that's kind of a bit of a story.
oof, I love that so much. I try to remind myself when I have these like moments of fear or discomfort in my life that those are the greatest opportunities for growth
Mm,
and impact. And oftentimes when we, choose to be uncomfortable in the moment, it
Mhm.
it is super hard.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had moments where you don't know if you want to continue down that path and you want to maybe choose the more comfortable route. But I think choosing that road less traveled in a way, or the one that's a little bit uncomfortable,
Mm.
has really led you to a lot of just incredible opportunities and impact that you've made. I want to obviously talk about your role that you have now, but let's backtrack to the beginning,
Mm.
because you have always had this incredible gumption and entrepreneurial spirit and desire to serve and lead. You've spoken at several events, you've put on several events. How did that all start? Because I think the helicopter story of you bringing people from Vancouver to the event by helicopter was one of those pivotal moments that kind of maybe made you realize, oh, like maybe I should keep pursuing putting on these events. And
Mm.
I want to know what happened at that moment back in the day that sparked something inside of you to maybe start doing the uncomfortable thing.
Yeah, yeah, great question. I think when I was in university, I was good at class, but I never really excelled. And I think what I realized was when you're given like a midterm or an exam or you're put in a class, you're, kind of put in a box and given a set of rules to say, okay, this is 100%, this is a fail,
Mm,
play by my rules, and best of luck. And so what I noticed in university was like, if I could not do a class and I could instead like create my own class, which I did a couple times. When you befriend a professor, it's called creating a direct study or an indirect study of
mm,
a certain class. And so I would befriend professors and I'd ask, hey, like I'm in Ottawa for this, couple months. Could I do a case study on learning about Shopify? They were rising at the time before they were as big and behemoth as they are today. And I said, if I could interview a couple people that built the culture at Shopify, and I, put together a 20-page essay on all my interviews and what I learned and how they're innovating and building one of the most valuable companies in Canada. Could I make that a class? And my professor Janny said, yeah, like green light, go for it. And so that led me to like cold DMing 100 or 200 staff on LinkedIn, on Shopify, eventually getting a hold of Harley, the president of Shopify, and then eventually doing an event with Harley,
mm.
where him and his friend, the co-founder of David's Tea, spoke about their life of entrepreneurship. And to me, that's a class I can get 100% score on because I got to create the rules. I got to, align my passion with learning, and I got to think outside the box and at that age learn kind of what entrepreneurship really was. And so I think when I had a couple of those experiences, I learned that I perform best when I get to innovate and create my own rules. And I realized that there's other people doing this in the world, and that's called entrepreneurship, or that's called building a startup, is people that see problems or systems that they don't believe in and they want to innovate or disrupt them for a better scenario. And so the conference story was really a similar thing where I think I was in my last year of university and there was like an operations class.
Wait, is this with Mark McKay?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I was like, I'm kind of getting, paid part-time by this agency to put
Yeah.
together this conference. Like, could I, if I report to you and build an essay or something at the end, like, could I count this as a class? And he's like, sounds good. And so that began my role of kind of developing the conference. And that agency took a big bet on me to say, we'll trust this kid who's planned a couple events to put together Western Canada's largest marketing conference. And so that's where they had a sister company with the helicopter brand, and so we could kind of use that as a carrot to draw in select speakers from San Francisco or New York that may not want to just come to a boring conference in Vancouver, but if they learn, hey, it's close to Whistler, a beautiful location, they can get flown in with a helicopter, and there's going to be a cocktail bar. Like, it was all about learning how to storytell, how to communicate a vision when
Mm,
you're in a sea of distraction. So that kind of led me to believe, wow, like if I'm all I have is this LinkedIn profile, I have no marketing experience, I have no event experience. I'm really just the guy that's willing to send a couple cold DMs. And I think when I saw that conference come together, 5 or 600 people in the room, I hadn't even finished university. I realized, wow, like social media is really an asset when used in a way
Mm,
that aligns with your goals. If it's used, without alignment, I think that's where it becomes dangerous. And we can chat about that where, a 13-year-old has TikTok and they're like, what do I do with this? Right.
mm,
Versus, a 19-year-old that's like, hey, you can build an event, like use this to message the top CMOs in the world and see who's going to come. And so I think that's where kind of my event curiosity came to life, was just wanting to build things and really wanting to learn when I felt like school as a system, although was full of great people, felt like I wasn't really tapping into my full potential. So
mm.
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So just as a background for the people that are listening, Joel and I went to the same university. We overlapped years a little bit. I'm a little bit older than you, quite a bit older than you. But I took quite a while to finish my degree and took some time off, etc. But I remember when you held that event because I'd heard from multiple people
Mm.
that this young guy from Trinity Western University was putting on this event and had brought, some really incredible thought leaders together. Have you always had the confidence and the tenacity to go up to people and start conversations?
There is a moment that kind of comes to mind when you ask that, which was one of my first friends that got married. I was the best man, and
Mm,
I was quite nervous to give that speech. And so I think definitely still have, you know, nerves and hesitation and anxiety around like, we'll call it imposter syndrome to
mm,
some degree of like, am I worth this person's time? Am I being respectful? But I think what I've come to learn is that as long as you are personal, respectful, polite, and willing to have grace, like if somebody is too busy or somebody, just had a kid and they don't want to reply, or they're building a huge company and they just literally do not have time, which is totally fair. I think I've just learned it's always okay to send a note and expect nothing in return. But if you do that 100 times, there will be people that reply, and those stories usually turn into something really special. And I think it's way stronger of an opinion to think, if I don't send that note,
mm,
you're living your worst case scenario on purpose, which some people would say, versus if you're willing to send a note, you're tossing a couple logs in the fireplace to say, if a kindling sparks here,
yeah.
this could be one of my best coffees of the year, of the decade.
You'll
And I
never
think,
know unless you try,
yeah, and
right?
I think like that's how I've gotten a lot of my jobs, or some really cool conversations. There's just been, yeah, I guess that curiosity to say like, what if? But I feel like it is always approached with like almost self doubting myself, or not knowing for my own good what's going to happen. Then eventually an event takes shape, and I'm like, whoa, this is kind of, I didn't think that far. And so,
Mhm.
yeah,
Let's talk about the power of social media. I'm quoting you.
yeah,
You said this in a speaking engagement that you were leading. You said, "We have made social media about how big of an influence that one celebrity can have, when it should be about how big of an impact one person can have with one message." That was really that was really powerful for me to hear. The fact that so many people in this world have, unique gifts that and stories that are so worthy of sharing to the world.
mm,
And sometimes they just need someone like you, for example, to, say something that inspires them to also share their story. Talk to me about the beginning of your journey on social media and storytelling.
I graduated high school in 2014. So grade 11
Whoa.
and 12, 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
I remember like, you know, pulling pranks, with friends and like tossing that on Instagram or Facebook, or that was kind of a moment. And then I feel like as university came about, like Instagram was kind of on the rise. I feel like Snapchat was still a big thing, probably still is, but I'm not
Mhm.
really on that. And then I feel like LinkedIn kind of became that next new world where, as you approach university and considering how you're gonna find value for your degree, so to speak, people were starting to ask questions, and I kind of just realized like a degree was a dime a dozen and it doesn't really guarantee or secure you any opportunity.
Hmm.
And it's all about how you position yourself and how you are willing to create your own luck surface area. And so that's when I kind of started reaching out to people or, asking for coffees, finding alumni, looking up CEOs in Vancouver and being like, hey, Arc'teryx is a huge brand. Like, is this CEO free for coffee?
I love that so much. There
Yeah,
was, like,
yeah,
no fear in you
totally.
wanting to reach out to someone who
Yeah,
is this high level CEO, but there's nothing stopping you, which I
yeah.
love.
And I think if there is students listening, like I feel like something students have is like a cuteness bubble, like a charisma bubble around you around like that says three things. It says, I don't work for a competitor. I know nothing about my life. And I used to look like you when I was your age. And when an
Mm,
older person sees that, they're gonna see you're at a school. So you're not working for a competitor. You kind of like I remember when I was in your shoes and like you're trying to figure life out. And so I think I realized that and I try to tell that to students of like some people like opening the door and giving support. And so if you ask enough times to certain people, they'll open that door. But then I think the biggest thing that hit me in the face was when I was in my third year of university. I was in Ottawa and the Hootsuite founder, Ryan Holmes, was in Ottawa. And my job after university was to get a job for either Hootsuite or Shopify. They were the only two brands at the time that had gone from one person to over 1,000 people
mhm.
and had kind of hit that unicorn status of a billion plus in value in Canada and not gone to the States. And they both were married. They had a couple, like a good family environment. I was like, these two are people that I look up to. And so Harley and Ryan were kind of on the docket. And I saw Ryan was in Ottawa for meetings, with some companies there. And I Instagram DM'd him and I Facebook DM'd him. And he said, I can't join for coffee, but I can join you for a walk to my next coffee. And he gave me those coordinates. And I was a student and
So cool.
I was like, I can't make this coffee because I was at my free internship that I probably should have skipped, but I was like trying to look good on that first week kind of thing. So I was like, could you do breakfast tomorrow morning? And he just like didn't reply, left me on red. Rightfully so. He's a busy guy. And later that day, I learned he was just meeting with like the prime minister or something like that.
No big
And
deal.
yeah. So that night I go home and I'm with my friend and I'm like, he gave me these coordinates.
Yeah.
I feel like if he replied once, we could still meet him. Like he's going to be leaving soon. He's probably here for the next day or two. And so I look up the coordinates, and one of the coordinates is a hotel in Ottawa, pretty fancy hotel.
Mhm.
I call the hotel in Ottawa, and I say, "Hey, my uncle's staying at your hotel." No hesitation, and I say, "My cousin and I are in town. And we have a birthday gift we've already put together, and we
That's
want to
very
drop
cool.
it off at his room." And they, of course, they hear a couple kids on the phone. They're like pre-COVID, pre like big privacy kind of thing. And they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, like his room's like 1892. And they
Stop.
they give the room. My friend and I go to the grocery store. We put together like some chips, some snacks, some fruit, anything you'd want in like a little care package. And it just says, a card on the top that's like, would love to get coffee tomorrow morning if you have time. And we go to the hotel, we drop it off. The hotel calls him. We walk out of the hotel, and a couple minutes later, he replies to the message and says, "That was awesome." He posted on his Insta story, and we go for a run the next day and a coffee. And I asked his permission and shared that story on LinkedIn, and that was my first viral post on LinkedIn where I basically just shared, "Hey, like everybody's human. Everybody's willing to have a conversation if you're patient and you're curious." And this is kind of a little bit of a story of me of a student kind of meeting Ryan,
Mhm.
and it got thousands of likes, a couple million views. I went to the Hootsuite office when I was back in Vancouver, and the whole team kind of knew about it, was like, "Hey, you're the guy that did the jog." And that was a huge light bulb moment for me of like, wow, like this platform is here to stay. And if you are willing to be creative about how you use it, it can open a lot of doors depending on what your goals are. And as long as that message is authentic and aligns with what you're trying to do, it can be a really, powerful outlet in terms of connecting with people and really making unique situations come to life. And so that story has always stuck with me. And I think something I try to carry into my like every day, every week life is just like, hey, if I go to a restaurant and have an amazing meal, why can't I leave a 5-star Google review, leave a photo, Why can't I go on Instagram, hit that contact button, and email the team and say, my server Jenny was like 11 out of 10. She deserves a raise because she did XYZ. Like probably 0.1% of people do that. And it's because we're busy. It's because it's too much effort. But I think it's like that area of social media that really intrigues me is like there's actually an opportunity to be way better humans and way, I don't know, stronger community members of the cities we live in versus, you know, I think what the media portrays of younger generations is like people on TikTok for 6 hours. And I
Mhm.
think there's also kids that are doing really unique things like building shoe brands or making a run club or something like that. And so I think social media is that two-edged sword where there's an amazing side to it, and then there is sadly and realistically a darker side to it as well. And I think it's learning how to have those hand in hand so that as friends and as family and as colleagues, we can kind of learn to steward it in a way that brings us closer together. So, yeah.
I love that. I really wanna just quickly touch on just your overall theme of how you've approached all of these individuals on social media, and it's with the intention to basically reach out to them and say, "You're incredible. I'm inspired by you." But the way in which you've done it, I think, has been really unique in the sense of you have never asked anything of that person. You have
Mm,
simply taken that actionable step to serve. And I think that's something that's super admirable and really unique in a way because I think so many people on LinkedIn, on social media, they want something from you,
mm,
and that's okay. But I
mm,
think when you come from a place of wanting to serve and wanting to elevate someone, one of the founders that you wanted to get in contact with, I think it was the founder of Shopify,
mhm.
it was his birthday coming up, you got a whole bunch of messages from his friends, and you sent that all over. Like, that
Yeah.
takes so much time and intention and thought.
Mm,
Just like with Jenna, how she loves words of affirmation, and you
mm,
got all of her Jenna is Joel's wife, by the way. You got all of her friends to send her love notes on her birthday.
yeah.
That's a super unique thing, and it seems like, every single thing that you do at any sort of touch point that you've had with
Mm,
a person, you've really found something in their story that touches them, and you've
mm,
found your own unique way to elevate them. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think that's
mm.
super, super cool.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I feel like encouragement and kindness is in high demand but low supply in the world,
Mm,
and something I feel like I've always appreciated in my life from coaches, mentors, family, friends, and I feel like, yeah, it's something I can always offer others.
mhm.
Um, and I feel like I always try to think of my younger self, like, when I was in grade 10, was the person I made a friendship with the one that said, "Hey, do you wanna go play basketball?" Or, "I love your, like, layup, like, could you teach me that? Like,
Mhm.
could you show me how you approach that?" And then the 3rd category is like, "Hey, like, I love your shoes. Could I, like, take your shoes or could you buy me shoes?" And I feel like those 3 levels are kinda like what we do on social media of, like, somebody being like, "I've never met you, but, like, could I get a job at Facebook or Meta?" And people are like, I don't know you, like, I'm not gonna start a good relationship with asking for a job.
Mhm.
I'm gonna start a good relationship by saying, I'm gonna, personally notice something or show interest in what you're doing, and then maybe in a year or 2, I'd be like, "Hey, like,
Then you reach out,
yeah, hey, do you
right?
wanna go for coffee?" And
Yeah,
maybe when there's rapport, like, you could ask their feedback on a job application, but I feel like that's something I try to always think of as stages of building
for
relationship, and
sure, for
and
sure.
yeah, if you don't know somebody, you probably shouldn't be asking a super deep question like getting a job, but hey, everyone's gotta shoot their shot, so
Talk to me about okay, so you started writing on LinkedIn quite some time ago. You've been super consistent.
Mm,
You started the personal brand brief, and then now you've switched that up to your new newsletter.
mm.
Remind me what that's called because I'm drawing a
Stay
blank.
curious. Yeah,
Stay
yeah, no
curious.
prob.
How do you use social media on a daily basis? And
Mm,
how do you stay so consistent with your content?
mhm. Yeah, good question. I think so I did take a bit of a break 2 years ago when my brother Aaron passed away. I, had a bit of a yeah, 2 family emergencies where my father-in-law passed and then my brother passed within a 2-month span, and that really was a season of leaning into family and leaning away from social media and work. And
Mm.
so I am honored you say I'm consistent, but I feel like I do want to new Chrome tab to the side, say like sometimes I have taken breaks. And I feel like I would encourage people to take breaks.
Is it because you got burned out, or do you feel like you caught yourself before it happened and you're like, "I need to take some time for myself?"
Yeah, I think it was more so a a resettling of priorities in the sense of when someone within your close circle, passes away, I think it shakes you up in a lot of ways. And I think it was more so a reconsideration of how I was using social media or gaining, energy or affirmation from it when in a darker season of life, I probably wasn't the healthiest thing. And so I think it was just
Mm,
when you're in a content creation flow or a state of mind, I feel like it requires a lot of curiosity, creativity, a lot of intentionality and drumming up thoughts. And I just felt like that curiosity, creativity bucket was quite low. And I was like, instead I should be focusing on exercise, counseling, family time, just like support. And there's a lot of ripple effects that families and friends of the family deal with when grief happens. And so I think it was just like prioritizing that and saying, hey, this storytelling social media stuff is a good thing at a different time. I think that was healthy to do. But I feel like if people are curious about tips, I think the three things I would say would be like I'm biased, but there's a great social media scheduling tool called Hootsuite people can use. And that has like a free account, couple accounts you can connect where basically instead of every day creating content, you can just go on and say once a week or once a month, here's 3 or 4 posts for the week. And so I use that with our LOI accounts.
amazing.
Use that sometimes on the personal side. And then I think it's the two other things I would say maybe could be a hot take that people would disagree with is force yourself to spend less time and force yourself to like care less about what you're putting out there in the world with the caveat of like unless you are Jimmy Fallon, Ellen, Serena Williams, a huge figure like that,
Mhm.
you really shouldn't have the pressure and burden of having perfect grammar, perfect visuals. I feel like you should really over index on frequency and iterations of reps versus like perfection and getting it right every time. I would say like done is better than perfect in that sense. And then as you go, you will start to iterate with more elegance, I think. And then I think the third thing is really always bringing it back to never staring at a blank page. Something I like to have is something that Sean Purdy talks about is having a swipe file. And that's basically just whenever something inspires you on your phone or your laptop, screenshot it, put it in a folder
Mhm.
on your desktop, your photo album, or your Google Drive, and just call it swipe file, August 2024. And it could be a photo somebody tagged you in, it could be a tweet that inspires you, it could be like an article that you thought has a catchy headline. Just put them on a swipe file. And then also, you can email yourself when ideas come to mind. Like, say I was biking over before the podcast and I was like, "Oh, I should do like a thank you post to Anne to say, what a great podcast day." Like, I'll just email that to myself and then I'll open that later today or I'll flag it and I'll say
Mm.
maybe Thursday, Friday when I have some free time, I'll just drum up a thank you post of what I've learned from the podcast session today. And so I think those are some things I've used to be like 99% of people, social media isn't their full-time job. And so I think like for the 1% of creators that like are Mr. Beast or, the biggest creators in the world, they have 10-person social media teams. But for us average folks, I think it's important to tap into curiosity, just getting it out there, starting a habit,
Mm.
and then also like keeping that swipe file of like, what are people, places, ideas that I can pull from so that I'm never looking at a blank page. So those are some things I'd use to kind of create momentum so that maybe there's less, yeah, pressure on kind of getting started.
Oh, that's so helpful. I think it's so easy to get caught up in like the whole analysis of paralysis
Yeah.
notion of something having to be perfect before you put it out. That's something I've really struggled with. And, sometimes the post or the photo that you spontaneously put up
Mhm.
has the potential to impact more people than the one that's perfectly curated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna move into the area of young entrepreneurs,
Cool.
LOI.
Mhm.
We've got so much to talk about in regards to that. You are now the chief marketing officer of LOI Venture. Tell me about that VC fund
Mhm.
and what you do and how
Mm.
you help young entrepreneurs under 30.
LOI was started, um, 5 years ago when Ryan Holmes at Hootsuite had, a thought to really put together an accelerator that focused on rising up young entrepreneurs in Canada.
Mm.
He wished somebody would have figuratively punched him in the face and said, "These are the problems to solve. This is how you build a startup. This is how to find the next wave, the next opportunity. This is how you build a pitch deck." And instead, he went from, building a paintball field to a pizza shop to his agency to eventually getting to Hootsuite. And he kind of realized that was like a 20-year journey.
Mm.
And he wished there was really an institution or system in Canada that taught young people how to approach entrepreneurship and how to build a startup. And so that was kind of the birth of League of Innovators. And the naming of League of Innovators is kind of the concept of league, meaning like kind of a Marvel, team, universe, superpower group, and then innovators just being kind of startup folks. And so there's been over 1,000 alumni that have come through LOI and over 1 billion in enterprise value,
Wow.
from folks like Tara Bosch from Smart Suites or Daniel Dubois or Swish Goswami, the Benny founders, the Bloom founders. There's a lot of folks in Vancouver and then Toronto, Calgary, but then also beyond Canada. And a little over a year ago, Ryan teamed up with another angel investor, Manny Pata, and they had the thought of, why don't we have a pre-seed seed venture fund that's investing
Mm.
in the alumni, but also other entrepreneurs that maybe are being turned a blind eye because of their age, because of their experience, because of their background. And so usually VCs are sometimes really good at allocating capital, but sometimes, and you do see it, but I would say more rare is it that you have a VC that has a founder experience so ingrained in the Canadian tech ecosystem. And so that's something Manny and Ryan have, building their ventures and writing, a couple hundred angel investing checks. And so they put together the venture fund, and we're now 25 investments in, and we back founders usually coming out of the accelerator, but also founders from across the world that are just building innovative startups, raising at the pre-seed seed level. So my marketing and community role kind of spans between the accelerator and the fund, just supporting with our portfolio, supporting with our storytelling, and really just helping move the dial on the founders that we're in the corner of supporting.
Is this really the one of the only accelerators in Canada that provides this sort of substantial support for young entrepreneurs? It is, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I would
Yeah.
say there may be a couple others that are doing something similar, like TKS
Yeah.
is a similar model, but focusing on youth and STEM. And then I would say there is a couple others that they may have different parts of it, but I think what's unique about LOI is that the accelerator is positioned as a charity, so it's actually free for any entrepreneur across Canada to join and do a program online.
They
Um,
have to be under 30 though,
you do
right?
have to be under
Okay.
30. Yeah,
Okay.
you or a co-founder, and so
Got it.
we'll usually work with 200 founders per year in different cohorts, different levels, and I think that model in itself where there is a high quality element, but I feel like it's a lot more accepting of if somebody's building, a program that may not be, AI or
Mhm.
software. It could be a CPG product. It could be a family farm that's trying to innovate, an aspect of their agriculture. I think that's where the accelerator becomes a unique vehicle of being very accepting and really just focused on increasing the amount of young entrepreneurs in Canada. So if somebody's doing university, but wanting to do something on the side, that's where LOI would say, hey, come here. We'd love to work with you. Other programs may say, go quit your job, go all in. And we do have that LOI, but I feel like it's a lot more, flexible. And then similar to the States, you'll see Y Combinator, Techstars, the Teal Fellowship. It's a similar model that LOI's been inspired by. And
Right.
so I think it's neat to see more and more of those things popping up.
Entrepreneurship is really tough and it is often really lonely.
Mm.
Talk to me about the different things that you're doing both online and in real life to bring young entrepreneurs together.
In terms of the accelerator and the venture fund being predominantly online, we try to do coffee meetups, events with, special speakers, whether it's somebody from SF like Wes Chan, the founder of Google Voice. He was in town for an event and we did a 100-person panel, or Arlene Dickinson, the CBC Dragons Den, Brian Scudamore, O2E Brands. We try to create outlets where founders, whether it's in person, online, or at events, can really gather and connect in person.
Mhm.
We've got the Cortado crew for running if people
Talk to me
ever
about
ever
that.
want to join. Yeah. So I think hikes and runs and saunas and cold dips are something we're seeing more and more in everyday life. Maybe thanks to Huberman, maybe thanks to just time. But I feel like exercise and getting the body movement is such a great way for people to connect. And so our founders, if it's after an event, sometimes we'll meet for a hike and lunch, or a workout and coffee. And I think that's something that's always been a highlight for people's years. And yeah, I would say it really just, I think, compounds the relationship you have. Like if your relationship is 90% online, but you have a hike, a lunch, and a co-working day together once a month or a couple times a year, I think it almost 10x's, the relationship you have just online. And so I think we try to encourage founders to take time away from the laptop and get to know each other in different ways, meet up in different cities. And
Mhm.
so I think that's what we kind of like to see.
That's amazing. Can you quickly tell me a bit about your morning routine? You move your body every single day. You run, you
Yeah.
work out, you bike, you do it all.
Yeah.
I love to see it on Strava. We follow
Yeah.
each other.
Yes. You
Talk
were
to me
the
about
OG,
that.
you were the OG Strava person. I feel like you've
Wow.
you've got that check. Something I haven't shared too much about, but a friend healthily peer pressured me into doing an ultra marathon coming up actually in,
4 days, three
yeah,
days. I
3
saw your
days.
email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Share with me a little
that's
bit more.
something that I think I've been reflecting about in terms of, when you have January, a lot of people love to set New Year's goals.
Right.
And I don't want to hate on New Year's goals. I think those are awesome. But I think what I've come to realize, at least for myself and a couple friends, is that it's easier to commit to a project that is so, you know, uncomfortable in the way of its challenge and its like size of like grandiose, so to speak, that it forces you to reorganize your week with daily habits that build to that project or goal. And that's kind of an approach I've been taking the last couple of years, is instead of choosing 5 or 10 habits I want to do a day, I'll choose 1 or 2 huge goals that I'll do in the middle of the year typically.
Mhm.
And so this one coming up is, it's a 100K run in Manning Park. And what happened was when we signed up, we all got the same plan, me and 4 friends.
Yeah.
And in January, we had a weekly plan that basically set out, this is how much you run on Monday, this is how much on Tuesday, this is when you rest, these are your gym days, this is your diet. And really, it was like a plan. It was like
Mm.
we didn't have a choice. If we wanted to survive this run in August, it's not a goal of having a cute daily habit that we believe and we want to like see ourselves do it. It was, if we don't do this, we will fail in August. And I think that's been fun to see come to life with those 5 friends. Is we have a group chat, we do group runs together, and really we've been kind of working through this group challenge together. And it's been our quote unquote personal goal of the year, but it's turned into daily habits because you really just need to organize yourself so that you can fulfill the goal.
Mhm.
And so I think that's something I like to do outside of work, is pick little projects, little goals, little adventures with friends that get me off the laptop, that get me into my body, get me moving. And so I would say a typical morning for me is getting out for like a run or gym.
What time do you wake up at?
It varies. Like sometimes some
Really? Okay.
nights, yeah, I know. I should have a set script I give you, and maybe other guests do, but I feel like the volume of running we've been having to do,
Yeah.
sometimes we'll do a double run day and we may finish one run at 9 or 10 PM.
Right.
It's really hard to get up at 5 or 6 AM the next day. We will try, but I may try and get an 8 hour sleep that would take me to like 7 or 8 AM. And so I think in a dream scenario, I would say it's like a little bit of a run or lift. It's an athletic greens drink. And I'm not just saying that because they're a friend of yours, but my wife and I do love having that. And I think it's like eggs, it's some kind of reading, some kind of quiet time. I never sleep with my phone in the room. It's always in the living room plugged in and off. And I feel like I try to not engage with it
Mhm.
until after I've had, time to collect my thoughts or do an exercise. I will bring it on the run or the exercise because I love plugging in the AirPods and getting some music, or sometimes I'll call friends or family on the run. And then usually what I've been trying to do as of late is have meetings start after 10 or 11 AM if possible. I feel like I do my deepest creative work in the morning and I try to wait to
Same.
do my meetings after. And then I think in terms of night routine, I've been really trying to do like a herbal tea. I'm trying to eat like before 7 PM if possible to kind of give myself time to digest. And then I always try to do like stretching if I'm in a static state, whether that's like on a call, taking a break. If I'm in the elevator, I'll try and stretch. And so that's something I'm also trying to work into my daily flow.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Daily habits, routines are so integral to set us up for success, and I
Mm,
love the fact that you move your body every single day. That's super,
mm.
super important. Let's talk about personal branding. You have really grown such an incredible personal brand. I'd love to know, what is your definition of personal branding,
I want to say it like it's a little bit of a jaded word because I think some people like
right?
the term
Yeah.
personal branding. Some are like, ugh, you know? And the sentence that comes to my mind that I've heard from somebody much more smarter than me is personal branding is just whatever people say about you when you're not in the room.
Mm.
So if you were to leave and I was to chat with uh, our friend Braden here, um, would we say, wow, and she put this all together. This is so specific about the detail. She's always bringing together these grand plans and she's super detail oriented. Like that essentially is what my mind would come to is when I'm on an Instagram feed or a LinkedIn feed, a newsletter feed, or I'm just thinking of a celebrity. What is it that I'm saying about that person when they're not in the room? I think that's the definition of reputation as well. But I feel like personal branding is just the story and values and characteristics that are communicated or positioned about a person that make somebody believe, a certain idea or story of that person. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. Like I
Mhm.
think we all know of personal accounts we follow where they make us laugh, they make us cringe, they make us say, whoa, you can say that. Like I think we've never met those people, but somehow we believe we have an
We know them.
understanding. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that when we see our favorite podcaster, whoever that may be, we feel like we know them, but
Mm.
we've actually never had a conversation with them. In fact, it's just the stories, the values, the isms, the conversations we've heard that put together this rapport and relationship of who we believe them to be. And so I think that can be a good and a bad thing. I think the truth is everybody has a reputation, online or offline, whether you like it or not,
Mhm.
whether it's your last time you've seen that friend at a party and they post every day on Instagram, or the last time you saw that friend and they never post. Their reputation is that they don't like social media or
Mhm.
they're not, maybe they're really invested in their personal life. Like I think by not having a brand, it's still a stake in the ground to be like, I prefer just to be in person. And like 100% okay. But I think it's looking at it from a means of, like, what do I value? What do I wish could be communicated or shared about what I believe if I was to have a conversation with everybody? And I feel like that's what my mind comes to
Mm.
believe about personal branding when I think of that.
I really wanted to touch on this topic because I think it's something that um, hopefully everyone can tap into in their own way, in their own capacity in their lives, because it really does belong to all of us. I
Mm,
think, regardless if you're an individual working for a company or you're a founder starting your own, it is so important to establish your own personal brand because at the end of the day,
mm,
people do business with real people. People buy products from brands because they feel that connection
mm,
likely to the founder and likely to the story of the
mhm,
brand.
mhm.
Talk to me about the advantages of one building their own personal brand, especially founders who have their own companies and want to share their stories alongside of what's happening in their businesses,
What's fascinating is that most big brands, the founder is actually more followed on social than the brand account
right?
itself.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because so an interesting like founder VC stat is that some investors won't follow on invest or continue to invest in a company if the founders dropped out or left. And that's
Mhm,
because they believe founder led companies are the strongest companies. So, an example would be even though he is controversial, Elon is running
mm,
a founder led company. And
mm.
so people believe as long as he's at the helm or Zuckerberg at the helm of the Meta Group, they believe they will continue to build and execute on a vision that only a founder led company would.
Let's, give examples to Canadian founders. So we've got Joanna Griffiths
Yeah.
next, she's
Yeah.
still heavily involved.
100%. You could also think of
Ryan.
yeah, and the Shopify team. There's a lot of hidden unicorn stories that are within Canada.
Do you think these founders realize that they're building their own personal brands when they're actually doing it?
They may not have in the past, but I think a lot of them are aware of it now. I think,
Yeah.
like, the Hootsuite story was a huge part of that, realizing everyone's becoming a creator and we should build social media tools to empower, like, creators and brands and social media teams. And I think, like, founder-led referrals are a huge thing in terms of joining a company or hearing about a role, like a huge like arguably one of the biggest referral sources is word of mouth from staff that already work there or from the
Mm,
founder saying, if Tara was building smart suites, she would say, "Hey, like we're hiring a CFO, come work with me." And her whole, family friend network may be able to support with that, or the staff at Smart Suites to say, "Hey, if you believe in the values that we have as a team, or
mm,
that the founder, created this company behind, which was kicking sugar, but like keeping the sweets. Like if that's a big part of your journey or that's something you relate with, come join this like human being leading the helm." And so I think that's something that you can't connect as much with a brand when you say, "Oh, like I'm gonna join a roofing company or I'm gonna join a." You're not joining a water bottle company. You're joining Vitamin Water, you're joining Liquid Death, you're joining this movement of people, usually led by a founder that is gonna connect with your heart and soul
mm,
of similar to Athletic Greens. It's not, "Oh, you're joining a juice company or like a protein water company." No, you're joining like a new movement of how we're redefining everyday health for the everyday person. And it's like,
mm.
whoa, that's like something
That's
I'd sign up
powerful.
for. Yeah, and I think I don't know if I got their one liner right, but that's I feel like where personal branding really has a moat that can't be tapped into. When you think of moats in the startup world, it's kind of like a protective layer that can't be copied. And so you think of Midday Squares is like a chocolate brand in Canada right
J.
now.
Carl's. I freaking have
You have
Midday
it.
Squares
Okay.
in my
And
fridge.
so
Shout out to
he
Jake.
there you
Yeah.
go. And so he's somebody that he
Such a cool
dances on
guy.
camera with vendors. He speaks at events. He speaks to schools. He
He's open, he's honest, he's
exactly.
genuine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
I think he's somebody that knows the power of what he's doing, but he's creating a moat that if you or I were like, "Hey, let's start like a healthy chocolate bar brand," we couldn't copy what Jake's doing because his unique personal DNA of his branding and messaging, people would just know that we're not
Yeah.
Jake, right?
There's
And
no one
so
else like him.
and I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing people need to think about is that you're building a moat of protection around your community, your fans, your customers. And not only is it yours to own, but it's yours to keep forever
Mm,
versus, if you build something, that is owned by different companies, such as like if you're building an Amazon business or something that's dependent on a retailer vendor, and maybe Amazon changes the algorithm and people can't shop the same way, or maybe Amazon cancels your product.
mhm.
How are people gonna find you or hear about you? You don't want to rely on people going to Amazon to type in midday squares. You want to go, how can I find Jake Carl's new website? Or, could I go to his Instagram? Could I go to his LinkedIn?
Mm.
How could I rediscover him? And I think personal branding gives you more surface area for your community to essentially engage, follow, and like be part of your journey.
It's overwhelming to get started. What
Yeah.
would you say to someone who is either a founder, who is growing in their lives and they're growing a business,
Yeah.
or an individual even who's more established in their corporate career?
Mm,
What steps would you recommend to those people
mm,
to get started in building a personal brand? What platform?
mm.
What do you do? How do you go about doing that? You
Yeah.
you are, I think, deemed as an expert in personal branding, so I'd
Mm,
love to know your thoughts.
mm. When you think of being a kid, hopefully you had an older sibling, a parent, an uncle, and aunt that taught you how to ride a bike. At
Yeah.
first, you weren't on an intense road bike going around France. You were probably with training wheels, probably with somebody beside you, probably just
Didn't
getting
know
your
what you
reps
were
in,
doing.
pedal by pedal, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people see people crushing it and they're like, I'm gonna go 100 miles a minute, like I'm gonna go full in. And I feel like that's just a recipe for burnout and missed expectations. I feel like people should start, pick one platform.
One platform.
Yeah, I would say, again, this is my hot take. I'd say pick the platform that you believe your prime audience hangs out the most.
Okay.
So for me, that was
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. It doesn't mean I can't have Instagram, but it doesn't mean I want to become fully known on like all platforms. I feel like that's a huge task. So I would pick one platform, pick a daily or weekly habit that you can hold yourself accountable to, whether it's writing one caption, whether it's posting 2 to 3 times a week. After you crush that
Mhm.
for 3, 4 weeks, they
Yeah.
say it takes like 21 days to build a habit. So give that 3, 4 weeks, up the ante, like do another thing and say, okay, I'm going to do 3 posts a week, but one of them is going to be a video or one of them is going to be an interview. And then if I crush that, go up another level and say, okay, actually now I'm gonna do 3 posts, one's a video, and I might start adding like video and captions. I'm gonna play around with that.
Mhm.
And maybe I'll do 2 of them being a video, or one's an interview, one's like a monologue, something like that. And then I'd say as you slowly build, have like a learnings list where you're saying like, I'm learning this, or I failed at this. Like that should be your KPI, your gold star of like, your goal is to learn. Your goal is not to go viral. Because if you're building this for the decades, which most people should be, not for the weeks or the months, your goal should be iterating on how you're learning and how you're performing versus like, did I go viral? Did I hit 100 likes? Did I hit 1,000, views? Whatever that is. They say most people, like Harry Stebbings from 20 VC says, I think if you make it to 50 podcast episodes, you're considered in the top 0.1% of podcasters. And that's because most people can't keep a habit. And that's the same with a diet. That's the same with exercise, is that people try to be all things to all platforms when they should just be privately building a habit for, I think, a couple months. And then
Mm.
after you do that successfully, come back and start layering on more. But I think you should really start easy, like start gentle. And then as you start getting the training wheels off, that's when you can start riding a bit on your own and saying, I'll do an interview. I'll maybe try a different account, a different, technique. But I think you should really get comfortable kind of scoring little layups, little dribbles here and there. And I think that just comes with time boxing, having your learning list, and starting with those baby steps.
Those
So
are so helpful, such helpful tips, thank you.
yeah.
What really resonated with me there is just taking imperfect action and
Mm,
not being afraid to share your
yeah.
experience. I think something for me is I've really struggled up until, I don't know, 6 months ago about
Mm,
the whole aspect of perfection. Everything
Mm,
had to be perfect because
mm,
there was a whole bunch of brands that I was representing
mm,
or people that I didn't want to let down.
mm,
And that stopped me from sharing my story. But sharing the story, sharing the journey of where you're going is just as
mm.
important as the outcome itself,
Totally.
right? That's what really makes people resonate with you. It's
Mm,
not often the success or the achievement at the end. And
yeah.
that's something unfortunately that I've had to learn the hard way. But
Mm,
now moving forward with everything I'm doing,
yeah.
I'm trying to share as much as I can of the vulnerable,
Mm,
the moments of struggle, right?
yeah. One thing I
Um,
may add too is group chats have always been helpful for me. I've had them on LinkedIn, iMessage, WhatsApp. Um, just having like if you chat with a friend, say we both leave this chat and we're both like, we want to really crush our newsletter this year.
mm,
I actually have a group chat of 20 newsletter writers where people share, hey, I'm trying this. Hey, I'm trying that. I'm trying to do one a week. Can somebody hold me accountable? And it's this group chat where as soon as you post, as soon as you finish something, you toss in the group. And it's just like kind of like an output accountability group. And I think
I
people can
love
build
that.
those for
I
your
need
own
that.
content. Yeah. And I think it could even be a group chat with 3 friends just saying, hey, I know you know me. I want to make sure my captions sound like it's me. Could I send you a Google Doc of my captions for the month? Or could I send you a post when it's out just to get your thoughts? And it could be a friend that even doesn't use social media, but could be like, and like that really sounded like you. I'm
Mhm,
super proud of this. Like,
mhm.
love the joke at the end.
Or
And it,
even just someone to keep you accountable,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Words of affirmation or,
Yeah,
encouragement is key.
totally.
Yeah.
Even you could toss a bet on the line. You could say, I'm trying, like sometimes anti goals help me. I'll say, I'm gonna try and, you know, uh, work out 4 times a week. Every time I don't, I'll get you a $5 coffee to this friend or buy you lunch once a month. And that forces me to say, if the friend says, "Hey, how's the lunch bet going?" I know what he means. He's saying, "Have you done your 4 a week?" And I feel like that's also a good accountability exercise.
Ooh, I love that. We're gonna do some quick rapid fire
Let's
to
do it.
end.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now?
Charlie Munger's book. I forget the title, but it's basically if you Google, it's like the almanac of Charlie Munger,
Yeah.
and it's basically just a collection of his thoughts, frameworks, quotes, AGM, letters, things like that, where after he's passed away, it kind of became a big thing in the founder investor world where people are just like kind of reconsidering what he's all about. I'm also a huge newsletter nerd. And so I don't know if that counts as
Yes,
reading.
I wanna hear about this. So
Okay.
who are you subscribed to? This is very
Yes.
important because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think the amount of knowledge that is probably coming into your inbox
Mm,
is, like, insane.
yeah.
So,
There's
how
a
do you
great
filter it out?
yeah.
Who do you read? What do you listen to?
I love testing a couple newsletters, and if I realize after a week I'm not opening it, I'll just unsubscribe, and
Okay,
that's actually a love language to that writer because then, if they know you're not active, it helps them out too.
totally.
Steph Smith is a great writer.
Okay.
She's like an internet trends creator thinker that works for A16Z. The My First Million guys are really interesting in terms of their newsletters, tweets, things like that. I have a friend named Fresh from Toronto that is kind of building his own company. I like to read his stuff. And then, yeah, I'm curious, who are your favorite things to read, whether it's books, newsletters, podcasts?
Books, I like to read a book every week,
Okay.
usually. Right now I'm reading, for the first time, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari
Mm,
by Robin Sharma. I'm
mm-hmm.
actually reading it with my dad,
Mm,
doing a father-daughter thing.
cool.
That's an incredible book. Something that I do every single day is my 5-minute journal. Take 5 minutes every morning to practice gratitude, and there's, like, a quote or something to think about throughout the day.
Mm,
Then at the end of the day, you reflect,
mm,
write 3 highlights, things you learned, etc.
mm,
What am I listening to? I love podcasts. I
mm-hmm,
love Diary of a CEO,
mm-hmm,
Jay Shetty. Skinny Confidential podcast is
mm,
fantastic. Anything on personal development or self-development, personal
yeah.
branding, wellness. Who am I subscribed to? Your newsletter. As of recent, I don't know why I wasn't subscribed to Stay Curious,
Mm,
although I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while. Um, I don't read a ton of newsletters,
yeah.
because I'm very aware of the amount of information that's coming in.
Try to keep your inbox tidy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
But very open to suggestions.
Mm.
So thank you for the ones that you gave
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Um, what's bringing you joy right now?
A good cortado. I love testing
Favorite
out new
spot
coffee
in
shops.
Vancouver is where?
I feel like it has to go to Revolver, Nemesis,
Yeah.
and JJ Bean. I think those are the top 3 for me.
Okay. What's your goal, your next goal coffee date meetup
Mm.
with someone?
Yeah, let me think, let me think.
Who should we manifest into your life? Or who should we, I don't even want to say manifest. Yeah, who's that person that you want to connect with for a
Mm.
coffee?
Seth Rogen and Ryan Reynolds have to be on that list. I feel like,
Oh, Ryan Reynolds is for sure gonna happen in 2024.
yeah, yeah, I
We still got
think
time, it's August. Okay.
exactly, exactly. I feel like,
Ryan Reynolds, okay.
DeGrasse could be kinda cool as I've gotten more into running, just, like, hearing his story, and he kinda joined a venture fund, so I think that's kinda interesting.
You know what's
Um,
super cool is Allison Jackson. She went to
okay.
Trinity as
Huh,
well.
okay.
She is at the Olympics right now
Mm,
and was a track star,
I
moved
didn't
into
know.
cycling. She's
Okay.
so cool.
Wow.
She loves to be creative on TikTok.
Mm,
We'll talk about that another time, but
love it.
she's awesome.
I feel like Kat Cole could be a good one if she's visiting
Kat Cole
Vancouver.
is a
A
beauty.
little
I've
Athletic
never met
Greens,
her.
meetup. Um,
She's not Canadian though.
I know, but she likes Canadians, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel
You
like
got a couple on your list though.
I do, I do.
You gotta
Well,
give me 3 names via text.
okay,
Let's make it happen this
okay,
year.
we'll do it. And who was on your list? It was
Um, all people that I wanna have on the podcast, to be
mm,
honest. So the
okay.
podcast is really about elevating people's stories,
Mm,
specifically Canadian stories,
mm,
whether they're, up and coming entrepreneurs or really well-established people in our community,
mm.
philanthropy, tech, fashion,
Cool,
etc.
cool.
Who's on my list? Well, I've got a couple of really cool people coming on,
Yeah, can't drop
but
names, or can you?
I'm not gonna drop names yet.
Okay, keep it a surprise.
I'd love to have Joanna Griffiths
Mm,
on the pod.
mhm,
Um, yeah, I think she's super cool.
mhm,
I'd love to have Tara.
cool.
Um, there's so many incredible people in
Mm,
Canada who are
mhm,
doing great things, and I think the reason why I really started Driven, the podcast, and
mhm,
then what will come is the agency as well, which is a
mhm,
personal branding agency, um, was from this just desire to really showcase how unique each person's story is and
mm,
how if they are able to find those specific things about them that no one else can replicate, no one else can do better.
mhm,
That is such a powerful thing. And that's why I say there is no one else like you, because there
mm,
is no one else like you.
mm,
And we all have incredible ability to create impact. It's just whether or not we find ways or can find ways to share our stories to do
mm.
that through the passions or the things that we're doing in our
Yeah.
jobs.
Can I ask what's happened in 10 years with the Driven agency that has you most excited? If you were to call your shot, say you're watching this podcast in 10 years, what has happened with the agency, the personal branding agency, or the
Or the
podcast
pod.
that you're like, this was a success or something I'm super proud of?
I think a success for me would be people coming up to me and
Mhm.
being like, wow, I listened to one of your episodes
Mm,
and I've never seen or heard of this person before, but they said this thing.
mm,
And that drove me to go after my dreams because for
mm,
so long I didn't think I could
mm,
because I wasn't good enough, because I
mm,
was fearful, whatever
mhm,
reason it may be. I
mm,
think success to me would be, wow, you were a person that started something with the true intention
mm.
to serve and highlight others.
Yeah.
And that led to other people
Mm,
and their stories being heard
cool.
and known. So
That could happen sooner than you
that's
think.
success
Yeah.
to me.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a number, it's not an accolade per
Mm,
se or an award or what have you. It's just more so having a platform and growing something where people can come together and feel inspired.
mm,
And, other creators, entrepreneurs, can really understand the power of personal branding and
mm,
that if used effectively and clearly, uh, their story can have the power to change lives.
Mm.
So,
Love
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Last question.
Mhm.
Our slogan at Driven
Mhm.
is, or our statement at Driven is, "There's no one else like you."
Mm.
What does that mean to you?
For me, it's a reminder that I've been put on this earth with unique talents and abilities, and to steward those to the best of my abilities, I think is the way I can live my life with the most honor. So I feel like that's what kinda comes to my mind when, um, yeah, I think of that.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mhm.
Joel, this has been such a pleasure, so much fun.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your time
of
and all
course.
the wisdom and energy you've taken
Mm,
into to sharing with the audience your story. So thank you so much. Talk to me about where people can tell me where people can find you, what's
yeah,
happening next, what's going on. And yeah, if someone wants to reach out,
yeah,
you know,
of
how
course.
can they do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn
Okay.
or Twitter and Instagram. I guess X is the new name, but just type in Joel Hansen, and then the newsletter is called Stay Curious. And then if people are ever in Vancouver or now Bowen Island, the next thing I'm working on is a little Airbnb over there. So that's kind of a fun new project. But other than that, always happy to grab a coffee or run, cycle in Vancouver. So
Amazing.
yeah,
Well, I'll make sure to include everything in the show notes. Joel,
awesome.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and
Pleasure.
looking forward to seeing that 10-year vision come to life. So
Thank you.
yeah.